Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Metagame Book Club. So for March 2015 through April. So special thanks, as always, to Games and Simulations Network for helping us host and helping us do the work, as well as the Neville Instructor for giving us that valuable insight to in the gamer world. So today's panel is myself, Chris. Hello. There's also Kay. She may or may not wave. There you go. Hubert. He's just stuck there with the permagrin.
Yep.
And unfortunately, Russell couldn't join us tonight due to some internet issues, so we wish his internet well. Tanya, as well, is here. And John. All right, so as I said before, this is week 3, the final week. We're in the home stretch here, so we're going to wrap things up on April 12th. This is our last hangout, maybe. So what you wanted to do is read the rest of the book. So you're going to start on level 11, all the way through level 17, which is basically pages 185 to the end of the book. And in case you didn't know, this is what the book actually looks like. So hopefully you have all seen this book before. Grid has one too. All right. So I want to turn things over to Kay to talk about things to know.
Okay, so we're going to give the rest of the panelists a vocab quiz. So go ahead. This is going to be the first one. Game Master. Okay, who wants to explain what is a Game Master? I'm going to...
Sure, I can go start off that one. Game Master. I am going to say that usually I find Game Masters and they're playing the role of referee. Also in MMOs, they're usually the people you complain to when you accidentally disenchant gear. So they're basically the company representatives or the organizers, the representatives of the organizers, and they enforce rules.
Anyone else want to chime in? And what is a Game Master?
Sure, I'll jump in as well. I feel like they also need to feel out the pace and the environment of the game and kind of make changes on the fly. Also try to advance the storyline of the game too, a little bit as well.
Okay, so let's go to our next vocab word. Dungeon Master. Anybody want to take that one?
Sure, I will. So a Game Master takes a lot of the roles similar to a Game Master, although the Dungeon Master is responsible for a lot of the game design, the mechanics, and designing quests, and a lot of the storyline that is involved in the games.
Very good, and I will chime in also because I used to be a dungeon master, and it is what Hubert's saying. If we were talking about a theater production, this would be the combination of like the director and the stage manager, and the person writing the play. But the thing about the dungeon master usually doesn't have a player role in it. So they're kind of like the person who is bringing the whole game along and the storyline, but they're usually not the person who's also playing the game, which makes it kind of interesting. Okay, so our next word, or does somebody else want to say something?
Yeah, another thing I would say about Dungeon Masters is for those of you old D&D players, this is the normal view you saw of your Dungeon Master. Sit there, a trifold in front of them. Saying, what monster's next?
Okay, so now for our next one, Puppet Master. Does anyone want to take Puppet Master? Oh, I know we've had a couple Puppet Masters here. And if not, I'm going to assign it to Chris because I know he's played Puppet Master.
So would a Puppet Master be the person who kind of guides an alternative reality game?
Absolutely right. That is what they're called. They're called Puppet Masters. And Chris, do you want to weigh in?
Sure. Basically, the Puppet Master, they're also they're similar to what you see with the Game Master and the GM. They sort of play different roles. Puppet Master usage has really come up with I think we're going to talk about it before, is looking at alternate reality games. There's the Puppet Masters are really sort of the planners. They're the ones that sort of lead people into the event, leading people in. They go out and are the ones that sort of push them towards the start of the game. So the Puppet Master really is a part of the design team, but they also play a key role as far as making sure they pull all the strings so everything works.
And the other thing I'd chime in about the Puppet Master is really coming out of ARG, and it really is pulling the strings. And the thing about it is, in a lot of ARGs, the Puppet Master, you may never see nor know who the Puppet Master is. So a lot of times, so a lot of times when it comes to the Puppet Master, the Puppet Master is the person who's very much doing things behind the scenes. It isn't necessarily getting recognition, and you don't necessarily know who they are, and they could be coming in and playing a role here or there. But the Puppet Master, the idea, at least with ARGs, is most of the time the Puppet Master stays really anonymous. Okay, so I guess my next question before we go on is, Lee Sheldon mentioned that to be a game master if you're designing your courses. What do you guys think about that? Do you think that we could learn anything from some of these roles that we're already seeing in games?
I think it could be kind of a little bit of all of them, depending. Somebody used an interesting phrase today at my workplace, and we were talking about science and the teaching of science. And we were talking about museums and museums of science and how they engage children, etc. And sadly, what we were discussing is that in traditional classes, science is, and he used the term, nonfiction language arts. And it just struck me as so sad, because we don't want science to be nonfiction language arts, which is sitting in a chair reading and writing. It needs to be getting involved. So if it's science, if it's social studies, depending on the content, depending on what it is you're trying to teach kids, I think any one of these roles might come into play, or maybe a mix of those roles.
Anybody else's thoughts on it?
Yeah, I agree too. I think, as someone that might be designing one of these for a classroom environment or a learning environment, you can take aspects of each of those roles. So one of the examples that I will point to is, so I used to coach Model United Nations, and we used to do this in a competitive format. And the thing I liked best about it was these role-playing scenarios where we had these crisis situations. And so you had someone who designed this whole story based on historical facts and assigned different roles, but then you had a puppet master who were pulling strings. You throw in all these random events or these situations or complications. You send in notes that the players would have to deal with, and so I think when we design these things, you can take bits and pieces of each of those roles.
And I think you're right about us doing it. When I was at the University of Nebraska, I had a commodity markets game. And yeah, I made it from scratch. I couldn't help myself. But yeah, I would throw everything at them. I mean, suddenly there would be a drought somewhere. Suddenly there was, a plague of locusts. And I mean, and they got to react to it, and they got to have fun. So I think that you're right about there are some things that are very interactive that we are doing already. That's very similar to this. Now, Grit, you said something very interesting, that we are teaching science like nonfiction language arts. What was the suggestion of how we should be doing it?
And it wasn't my word, but it just stuck in my head because I hadn't heard it before. And the individual that I was talking to is somebody who's worked a lot in museums. And the conversation was about how museums are really trying to and what formed right away in my brain was this juxtaposition of museums where children can go in and touch and play and roll around and stuff, and even the bugs and things, and specifically science museums, like, ooh, I'm going to touch the big cockroach. Does anybody want to touch the spider? We've all been to those.
Yes.
And yet in school, the picture is kind of different. The picture is people sit in their desks, in their chairs, they get a paper and pencil, and everything's kind of read to them or told to them, and then they write down things. Not that there isn't value in those things, but then there's that other extreme of what museums are doing. And where it's going now, from what I understand, is museums are trying to do some role play because they want more of that, and they're very good at putting out exhibits and demonstrating things to children and having them touch and feel these things. But now they're actually hiring folks that know something about theater because they want a theatrical kind of a thing, but not a theatrical thing where somebody performs on stage and the children are just sitting in their seats watching, but something where the children are going to be interacting. So they're breaking that fourth wall, and and the children and the actors are coming out and interacting with the students, bringing the students up on stage, and sometimes it's completely unpredictable. A child will draw a picture or create something, and the actor has to be somewhat, spontaneous in dealing with this, with whatever it happens to be that the kid says, and sometimes it may not be completely appropriate, but but these actors have to be skilled in being able to incorporate that into whatever their act is. So a little improv, I suppose, is what they're looking for.
Does anybody else have any other comments on that? Okay, then let's continue on to a couple. Like, now we're going from words to acronyms. Okay, so who wants to handle ARG?
I could jump in on ARG. ARG, alternate reality game. A lot of times these are games that are layered over kind of real life situations. So you can think of a game kind of set in the real world where you're maybe going to real places, but there's this layer of gamification on the top that engages you with that. So one example of it I can think of is Dow Days on the UW-Madison campus, where you're going to real life places, and overlaid on that, I think they use the Eris app to experience what happened that day, but going to those real locations and meeting these digital characters who explain to them what their goals are and what their tasks are. So this alternate universe layered into the real world, and you feel like you're playing a role in that alternate world, I guess would be my take on it.
Anybody want to jump in on ARGs? Like someone who's run a couple in his class, Chris?
Sure. So basically what is interesting with this is that you can, it's really fun because you start thinking about, it's one of the things where as an instructor you start thinking about barriers to learning, but in a good way, because you want to try to make it challenging, you want to try to make it hurdles. And the real key thing with doing ARGs is you want to start off fairly obvious, and then you can start making it a bit more a bit harder as you go through and really have that scaffolding piece to it. Because if you make the first clue too hard, or I've been guilty of this, sometimes the clue isn't as obvious as I think it would be, and so no one plays, and you gotta go, hint, click on this, or you should really look this up. But it's a lot of things you can do, and quite honestly, you can do it fairly inexpensively. I mean, there's lots of apps out there you can use. I've used Tag What is a piece I've used. I forget what the other. I think it was Drop.io was another one that I used that was bought out by Facebook, so it's kind of not there anymore. But there's a lot of different programs that you can utilize to go ahead and let you go ahead and make this a lot easier. And a lot of them start involving what is known as geolocation. The idea is based on the use of mobile technology. Now your phone has a GPS chipset in it. It also may or may not have an accelerometer. And basically, the thing about it is that it actually can give you within a certain margin of error of whether it's feet, inches, or miles, depending on how good your phone is. Basically, once you're near this space, you can actually get videos and different things that'll pop up for students to actually utilize. So there's lots of different things you can play around here. I've also done it where I've collaborated with another class. So one of the things we did is we did one based on D.B. Cooper, and we had an accounting group and a criminal justice group work together. This is at the community college level. And what was interesting is the criminal justice class was located about, I would say about 50 miles north of where the actual accounting class was. So it was two campuses in the same system, but one was up by the Wyoming border, the other one was down here in Denver, and basically they communicated virtually only. And so what it was is the criminal justice students were investigating the D.B. Cooper case. He's the guy, in case you didn't know who D.B. Cooper was, he was the guy who got $200,000 for hijacking an airline, and then somewhere between, while he was flying from basically Washington towards Mexico, he sort of jumped out the back of the plane. And only recently did they solve it. But at the time we were doing it, it was still unsolved. The FBI was just now starting to sift through the files and inviting more people to come and talk about it. And so the accounting students were serving as accounting consulting companies. So basically, the criminal justice were looking at pieces of like forensic accounting. They're looking at money transfers and looking at balance sheets and things like that. And so they're using the accounting students to consult with them. And the accounting students, they created their own firms. So we broke them out into groups. They came up with their firm name. They came up with their areas of expertise, and they sort of came up with resumes for the actual business. And then we gave those to the criminal justice students, and then based on, I think it was based on their performance on a test or something, the instructor then let them whoever set up the order of picking. So they get to pick whatever one they wanted to pick first. Whoever scored the highest got to pick first, and then down the order until finally someone was like, it was like kickball. Someone's left. You're like, well, I guess I get you. So it was kind of fun how that set up.
And Tanya, I believe you were involved in something like an ARG at the ISTE conference in Atlanta. I think it had something to do with the zombie apocalypse or something like that.
Okay. Well, do you want me? We did do a presentation at ISTE 2014, and actually, the folks that are here presented, and we were presenting to a group about what an ARG was, and we had some person speaking in a kind of a boring tone, sort of pretending to put on a presentation. And while that was going on, and being that when it was in Atlanta where the CDC was, one of us came in with sort of a uniform-looking look and managed to get one of the security folks or policemen that was in the convention center to walk in and look very officious and speak to one of the, well, actually it was Kay, and talk to Kay, who was there with the speaker, and look, and then we kind of left the room for a little while everybody was kind of talking. And I mean, they knew it was a presentation, but it was kind of cool with ISTE as we got to watch how they were reacting with the fact that we left for a number of minutes and they were trying to figure out what was going on, blah, blah, blah. But the whole thing was that, this thing had happened, and these people could not leave the room, and they were going to have to solve this and at that point they kind of figured out what it was. But it was sort of the setup of this game-like scenario, and it was very short because it was only in the hour that was given during the ISTE conference. but they kind of got the feel of the game. But I know that was based on something much longer that you had done, Kay, with the zombie apocalypse. You had done that in your university, correct?
What it was is one of our psychology professors, Holly Chandler, she constantly got asked by students when she was teaching them the brain, like she constantly get the Walking Dead references. So what she ended up doing, and she didn't make it a full-blown ARG. Basically, even though the students absolutely knew it was a game, she came in and she gave them this alert, and then gave them the mission. and she even showed like two minutes worth of this is like fair use, but it's like not even 2 minutes. It's 54 seconds from The Walking Dead where they talk about brain function, right? And then she ended up giving them the questions, and they had like 2 weeks to go ahead and figure out what the answer was to these questions. And her test scores really went up on brains because the students were getting very involved and thinking about this. And I would say this is ARG-like because everybody knew it wasn't zombies. But despite the fact that little bit of spicing this up, just really went a whole long way for students. And we did this presentation at my college's conference. We also did this presentation at our state conference. At my college campus, I will tell you, we did get one feedback that they were embarrassed for us for doing this, right? And we laughed that off. Now there was, but when we did on the state level, we got phenomenal feedback. In fact, the state director's son just happened to come into our thing, and he ran out and grabbed his mother so his mother could come in and see what was going on there, because we did the zombie apocalypse. And so you were at a 4-year Research One university with a bunch of professors who were enjoying this. And I mean, you might not be able to do it every day, but think about being this kind of puppet master. And I think I also put our sketch out of our script, and it wasn't on the page, but I don't think it was actually even I don't even think it was a script if I look at it. I think our script was something like something very simple. Timeline: we have an hour. Introduce this thing. Blue gives the worst PowerPoint lecture ever. Well, Kay and Izzy break people into groups, and the way we did that is Grid got us a zombie deck of cards, and we just broke people according to suits, numbers and suits. A lot of going in, some version of this, the objectives in the first 10 minutes, and then the additional crisis when we said that they were having a much longer amount of time, and we said we can't do it because the zombies are invading. So that's that, and I put the material up for it. But this is just a fun way to do it, and zombies are very popular in lots and lots of classes now. Okay, so that's giving you a little idea, and I said this was ARG-like, or it might be something like what our next vocabulary word is. So our next vocabulary word is LARP. Okay, so who wants to take what is a LARP?
Well, I'll take it. So LARPs are live action role-playing games. So if you think about, so Chris had mentioned Dungeons and Dragons. So that's an example of a tabletop kind of game where you have a dungeon master who sets the rules and referees, and everything happens at the table. So it's not actually acted out. With LARPs, you actually take that into a real world environment and you act it out. So the players are actually physically role playing the scenarios or the game. And then you do have what we talked about earlier with game masters and puppet masters, where you do need someone or a group of people to oversee the design of that role play, and also to make sure that there are rules to how things progress.
And the thing about this role play, there's lots of people. When it comes to role playing, there's lots of companies, and even the U.S. military that does a huge amount of role playing as people are learning. The U.S. War College does a bunch of scenarios and role plays to get their officers ready in a lot of different ways. Okay. Also, in language classes, role plays make such a difference. If you have the students actually role playing something with the vocabulary and the grammar that they need to do, as opposed to as opposed to them just taking that vocabulary test and working on the grammar quiz. Now,
And
does
I, and
it?
I
Oh,
would
go
also
ahead.
say that it's often a lot of people look at this. They don't often refer to as LARPs, but it's real world simulations, right? Um, so, like, I work in a healthcare network, and we do a lot of these types of LARPs or simulations where we have people act out different scenarios. They have given certain instructions. So, say that we have a hospital emergency. Uh, so we might have a disease.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, in the hospital, and so we have roles that are given out, and we have specific instructions, and it helps us, just like, similar to like what the military does, where we have this as sort of a practice for what they would actually do in real life.
And I mean that happens a lot at my community college. It's our allied health students who are always involved in that. And you can tell exactly when the EMTs are going through a certain amount of their training, because we have a bunch of gurneys and people who are role playing, basically, people who are sick or victims, and they kind of lined up in the halls, and we walk past them, and the students, they're expected to, and the reason they're not doing it in a pristine place is because they want the students to listen for the heartbeats in an area where people are talking, where people are walking past. They want them to not be self-conscious if things are being seen, and they really try to get them into an atmosphere where they could be doing it. And a big thing that I've especially heard with EMTs and even ER doctors, that the reason the role play can be so important, especially when it comes to team building and in operating rooms and ERs, so that they can get the communications down before they're actually working on people. Does anybody else want to jump in?
Well, I just think, role playing in general. I mean, of course, we've all heard that, all the fun stuff is in kindergarten, and we do a lot of that fun stuff in kindergarten. They play in the kitchen. They play, that they're farmers or policemen or whatever it is that they play. And then by the time we get kids to third grade, they're sitting in chairs and for long periods of time, and we're expecting them to learn. And it's tough, and it keeps going that way. I think by the time you get to high school, there are some classes where those kinds of things happen again. And I know, like, say, in literature classes, students will be assigned to make a movie, and there is some acting involved and some playing involved in that kind of thing. But for the most part, these things, they take time. They take time to plan. They take time to carry out, and I think that might be one of the issues of not doing this, that it's time consuming, and somehow we have to demonstrate and show the evidence that this time is well spent, because you might get through the novel faster, you might get through the unit faster, you might get through the text faster, but you may not learn it as effectively as if you take the time to do these kinds of things, to do the games and to do the role-playing and that kind of thing.
Okay, and I'm going to pull a Sherry Jones, because she does this all the time, right? So I'm going to pull up what we have here, just so that you guys can take a look at it. So under LARP, and the fun thing about these words, we're giving you ARG and LARP and Dungeon Master and Game Master. Wikipedia actually gives you one of the best definitions, okay? You'll find a good working definition there, as opposed to necessarily going to that peer-reviewed journal. So for your information literacy, for this kind of stuff, Wikipedia is okay. Now, also besides game masters in LARP, they're also called game marshals. And I just wanted to show you guys some of the depth that goes into this. And just thinking about, what if you had your, I mean, develop a LARP for your students, absolutely. I'm all for that. Okay, spend your summer doing it. But on the other hand, what about your students doing that? And I just wanted to take you through some of this stuff. Now, right here, I just pulled up something that is basically, I just looked at, I'm in Colorado, so I looked up Colorado, right? And it's sitting right there. There is a very, very detailed rule book that goes through everything. And I believe Chris might have it up, so I'll switch to his page. But it is, look at all these things. Races, classes, skill system, production skills, special abilities, mental abilities, logistics, in-game limitations. It's kind of everything that we pull up when we pull up like WoW and MMORPG, just to show that what a complete system it is and all the things that you need to know when it comes to that. And then, besides looking at that, and the Alliance is one of the big ones. So let me go here. Here is basically their con or their conference, and I put up the frequently asked questions. So they give it a definition. Why LARP? I play tabletop role playing. How is it different? How do I sign up for games? And it's like, individual sign-ups begin in November, but sign up as fast as you can because these go. So people go to these to go ahead and play these. And who runs it? Where do you find these great games? How do I get involved? What is interactive literature? Now, this next one, I'm just going to toss some list of events. And these are all the different LARPs that are going on. And I just love going in here to look at it. A respectful calm. So we have a bloody shooting here. So here's a murder mystery. Good for any kind of critical thinking, any kind of science. And even it could be good if you're having your students, work on note-taking when it comes to it. Across the Stars. So this is about a race so old that they must be the first to rise to sentience. An Evening at McNally's Pub, Atlantic City 1920, Bad Apples, BBC Reality in cooperation with Juniper Mining Corp. But look at all these different ones. And just think about even giving your students the assignment of writing one of these. And anybody who's ever been involved in say, theater or has coached a drama club, you absolutely know the kinds of skill set that your students develop when they have to do stage management, when they are working on any kind of the production crew, and everything like that. Now, let me go back. Let's see what else. Oh, okay. And here's one. And I was thinking we could get a group to compete maybe some year. This is Iron. This is Iron Game Master. They give you 24 hours to write a 2-hour game, okay? Based on 3 secret ingredients and 1 secret prop. Previous competitions had such ingredients as the Illuminati, Kabbalah, and enhanced humans. And another one was drugs, fascism, and children's music. And these don't get involved until 24 hours until the start. And then, if you don't feel writing or value your sleep, you can still participate, sign up, and help decide which team will win. I mean, the prizes aren't anything great, but man, think about this. No writing. You have to do 12 character sheets, runtime instructions, rule sheet, printing instruction, envelope stuffing instructions, and plot Bible, outlining plot, character, and built-in game time and events, as well as instructions on running any of the mechanics. Of course, you know, I'm thinking, wow, 2016 in Denver, LARPing at the ESD conference. But we'll need a lot of help there. The other one I'm going to jump on, here is the WordCon 6. This is more interactive fiction, not interactive fiction, interactive literature definitely, and storytelling. They do have some LARPing, but it's a nice thing to look at as a storytelling conference. And I'm not saying you have to go there, but it's a great place to look at these things to get ideas. And the reason why is, how could you modify this for your class, or maybe your grade level, or dare I say, maybe you could do this as some kind of professional development training with teachers to get the, you know, the creativity going, to get them thinking about this and thinking about how they could bring something like this into their classroom. I think things like that are really fun. And the last thing I wanted to show you, Grand Marshals are basically the referees. Not quite the game masters, but the people who stay outside and look to make sure the rules are happening and that the storyline's going. I wanted to pull this up just because there are flashcards to study for your Grand Marshal test. So they are definitely taking this seriously. So these flashcards do things like adjudication, regulated behavior, what is a hold, dangerous combat infractions, illegal, and then you get to the really fun stuff. It's really like being a dungeon master, or even barbarian advantage. Okay, the one thing that we didn't talk about with LARPing is just like having that character sheet when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons. You do have this all outlined. Someone does say that they're going to give you the barbarian advantage for resisting fear. And we did put up on the Metagame book club, so it's a little series, and it's from the same channel, Geek and Sundry, that gives you the series, The Guild. But take a look at it. I will tell you there is adult content in there, so put your headphones on, but you can get a general idea of how some of these things are being played. So, does anybody else have anything to say about LARPing before we continue? And I know we haven't convinced anybody to do a LARP yet, and I know it's because it's a lot of work. But who knows, it might be worth it.
Yeah, the thing I'd say is I was looking at the Alliance group is one of the references they have, and they actually have gone ahead and done a 63-page player handbook that gives them the background of the countryside and of the different roles and other different races and classes in there that players can play. They also talk about the rules of the land and different pieces like that. That way you can go ahead and really get it. And that's one thing I can say is very characteristic of a lot of these groups, is that they try to be as detailed as possible. It would be kind of interesting to see how they act and how it actually plays out. But you can see there's a lot of attention to detail here as far as trying to get everyone on the same page. And the funny thing about it is that it's 63 pages. I know we struggle to get a lot of people to read lots of stuff, but most of the players in here would have all of this memorized and be able to probably cite you line and verse.
I was going to say, if you don't think that's a real-world skill, I believe that, and Hubert might be able to pipe in here, you know, representatives at the UN have staffs who absolutely know everything when it comes to parliamentary procedure there, right? In the U.S.
Absolutely.
Congress and state legislation, and I mean, the thing of it is, that is, you know, the memorization, the knowing how to bend the rules, the knowing how to loophole them, you know, that is a real-world skill. And Jonathan just put in there, I'd love to hear the pitches at the end. Well, I'd love to hear from you, John, if you tell us what you meant by that, or what's going on in your mind, because it sounds intriguing.
I'm just thinking, reading up about that competition with the 24 hours to come up with a live action role play. I think that could be so valuable. I just know even I coached a debate team, and really the debate team is a live action role play of debating a bill or a topic. And the value that those students had. They had a intimate knowledge of governmental procedures, the history and background of what's happening in our nation currently, and had to know and keep up with if anything changed. I mean, I remember when General Petraeus had to step down a few years ago, they had to know how that would affect their role and their stance and the person that they were role-playing in this debate, how they'd respond to that, and how it would destroy maybe an argument they could have made about that person. So kind of interesting how this idea of LARPing can give you such a deep background knowledge about what's going on if you just step into the shoes of someone contemporary, fictional, and just gauge their reaction to a situation.
And I'm wondering if that's something that we either do at ISTE or consider just doing through the book club. I mean, maybe crowdsourcing one of these. Because if it takes a lot of work, if we had if we had to, if it took a bunch of us to do this, and you might not have somebody else at your school who is just loving the idea of it, but maybe we can set up some groups about this or something like that. And Hubert just typed something, but he so has to say it too. What he just typed also.
This is just to piggyback on what John was saying. So when I coached my Model United Nations team, so we would go to these competitions in far-off places. And so I had to convince my school board to, one, to fund us, and two, to let us go. And I would always bring the students to go and give their perspective on the value of those kinds of, and what John was saying was like, these are LARPs. And so what the kids always said was that they learned so much by going to those competitions because they prepped up so much time in knowing the roles that they're assigned to them. So they're representatives from, say, Kenya. The whole point was that they're supposed to take the perspectives and the attitudes and the culture of that country. So essentially it's those role-playing cards that they get. So they have to prep all of that, plus they have to prep against, what are the current events, what are the history of not just what's happening in their country, but in international affairs. And so what the kids had said was that they learned so much from doing those things rather than what they did in the classroom. It's much more valuable for them, and such more of a dynamic experience.
And I think that's something that we could really consider. And I was just pulling up from the WordCon, and the WordCon absolutely believes that they are doing transmedia storytelling, which does fit into ISTE and using things like that. And I'm just looking at some of these up here of things here. And I mean, we don't have time to do this right now. But I mean, I'm looking at the table of content, pulling the trigger on player agency. I mean, that's really what and educational live action one listed there. Lessons learned from the LARP promoting social realism in nursing simulation. I really think there's a lot that we can be looking at. And I mean, okay, so anybody who's taken an education class, chances are, if you've taken your graduate work recently, you might have got some games and simulations in it. But you were probably digital, and you probably didn't discuss this too much. But Grid, I really think the interactive theater and the museum studies and what museums are doing, I think perhaps we take a look at that a little bit more. And I really don't care if things are called ARGs or LARPs or anything in between. I mean, anytime you're playing a role, it can really, you're in game and simulation land.
I can tell you, a couple of years ago, and maybe it wasn't as much of a game as a little bit of acting, but there was an old television show, Meeting of the Minds. And I was teaching a group of middle school students, and it was social studies, and it was a leadership study. They were gifted kids, so I could kind of get away with escaping from the curriculum per se. And they all picked the leader that they wanted to study. Now, in your standard curriculum, what do? The kid goes and does research, X number of books, they write a report, they have a nice bibliography, and then they stand up in front of the class and tell their report, maybe show a few pictures, slides if they're really advanced. But what they did is they became that character, and little things like what would they pack in their suitcase, what would they have in their regardless of who they were, even if it was somebody way back in, and then ultimately we had kind of this meeting of the minds, and they came in costume and they talked to each other. So it was kind of funny because they were in different historic periods. So you might have somebody like Evita Peron talking to, I don't know, somebody like, Alexander the Great, somebody in a completely different time period, different dress, different everything. But their perspectives on leadership and their perspectives on how they handled emergencies, how they handled people, how they handled success and failure, were things that they learned, and it wasn't something you could do on a test. It was memorable because we had a few costumes there, and it was like, yikes, I didn't think of this one kind of thing. But a fun thing, and I mean at the time I didn't even know I was doing anything like that. It just seemed like a fun thing to do, and probably the kids were, I don't remember, but the kids probably said, hey, what if we, let's blah, blah. And it was like, okay, let's. And they may not have learned about every leader. Each child certainly learned about the leader that they studied, and each child learned something about leadership and the fact that there is a very big difference in the way different people lead, and good and bad, because some of them picked leaders that were not necessarily, heroic or wonderful, but they were leaders, and managed to get a whole lot of people to follow them to do something. And even the good ones had done things that were probably not so nice. So it was a real big learning experience, but nothing you could put on a standardized test.
Well, no, not a standardized test, but there are other forms of assessment out there. Yes. And I mean, there's things like hackathons, there's game jams, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. And I seen that we will be we are running very close, and we will be cutting our things shorter than we had thought. So I'm going to get moving really quickly. So I just wanted to pull this up, that intercon convention rules. Most important rule, have a good time, do unto others, do not freak the mundanes. I just had to put that there. So let's move on now to our discussion questions, and we will be putting these up tomorrow. So the first one, discussion question is, even if you aren't planning on using it until sometime out in the distant future, tell us a story about your game. Okay, so we're asking you to do that. Now, Matthew Miller did a really good job about telling us about his universe where all the magic had gone awry, and the only way to get it back was for the students to program. So this one, since we've been talking about you as the game master, and we've been talking about LARPing and ARGs, tell us what theme you'd like to use. Is it a disaster? Is it zombies? Is it sword and board, Dungeons and Dragons? Is it Tesla and Edison, perhaps? Is it, the 1960s? There's lots of different themes that you can go for, and just have fun with this one. Just go and post in discussions, even if it's something you don't think you'll be using right away, or maybe it's something you can never use, but you'd like to throw that idea out there so people can go ahead and look at it. Next question. This is for you. If you are going to be that visible dungeon master or game master, tell us. tell us. Are your students going to choose characters? Are they going to be digitally represented, or are they going to play, or are they going to do dress up? Are they going to do cosplay for that? Or perhaps you're using something like Classcraft, because I think Karen Stark is using Classcraft, so she might be having them. Those are already built in for the students. So tell us about that. The next one is about ARGs and ARG-like experience. Use your imagination. Please share some ideas on an ARG story that might work for you, because we want to hear it. And then on the last one, go out and look up an ARG, or find an article about an ARG, and go ahead and share that with us. Okay, lessons learned. We will be skipping because we're running out of time. Luckily, we did hear some lessons learned. Chris, if you just want to talk through these in a very short amount of time, that would
Sure. Basically, when you're designing this stuff, look at backwards by design, because sometimes that's the one that actually works best. Is going ahead and looking at what your outcomes are and then trying to go ahead and build from there. Next thing, make sure you find collaborators. It can be a lot of work doing this all by yourself. So the more collaborators you have, makes it a lot easier. Plus, like I said, you get to have lots of creative ideas with people, and they also can also play different characters and different roles. The other thing about it is always look to improve what you're doing. It's the same thing you do with your class and same thing you do with your class preps. You're always looking at how can you revise what you're doing, how can you continually improve it, how can you make things better semester after semester. Also, the other thing to look at is play around with the duration time. When I've done different things in class, I found sometimes 2 weeks is best, sometimes a month is best. It really depends on your group, their attention span, and also how long you want to stay in character. Because it can be a really long time. So those are things to think about there. So always looking at the duration and seeing how you can go ahead and how long you want to be able to make it. Next thing, stay in character. If you're going to really commit to it, definitely don't just don't bounce in and out of character whenever you're doing it. If you are the super secret spy, you've got to act paranoid. You've got to act. It's different. If you have somebody who is, if you're going to try to find somebody and fake people out and make people think that they're somebody else that they're not, then you're going to have to make sure that it's not the janitor that they see every day and they know he's a janitor. So you have to find different people in your building, different people in your district that they may not know of. And another thing about it is feel free to use the technology. Feel free to bring people in virtually so that way they can play that role. The other thing for all your instructional designers out there, job aids and storyboarding, they really help you really sort of flesh out your project, really let you set up the wireframe so you get a better feel for it. PowerPoint is a fantastic storyboarding tool. It's very easy to put things into sequence, very easy to storyboard everything out. And again, having job aids to help your players as well as helping everybody else who is working on it. So have the scripts. Don't let people wing it. Give them a script. Have them review the script and do it. And like I said, a lot of this stuff comes down to project management. That's really how you pull it off, is really
Okay, in case, and we're not sure if the audio just worked or not, but what we're saying is more Chore Wars, there will be more quests. And we'd like to thank you for watching. This is the third week, but I have a funny feeling, well, that we might not be doing Hangouts for the next month or so. I think that somehow the Metagame Book Club will continue. So just want to say thank you very much. And pulling this up, this page actually can give you a lot of ideas. Like we said, the series is short, fun, but it is adult content. Okay, so we want to thank everyone, all of our guests and speakers. So Chris, we got Tanya, we got John, and Hubert got dropped for some reason. We want to thank Leanne and Christina and Trish and Matthew Miller and everybody else who helped us with these. So thank you guys. Thank you for watching.